Welcome to Torah Today Ministries, our continuing series Parshah Seasonings, where, as I say each time, we look at some of the hidden details of the Hebrew language and of the Torah scroll. And this week we begin the book of Exodus, better known, or at least known in Jewish circles and Hebrew circles as Shemot, which means names. It begins in chapter 1, verse 1, and continues through chapter 6, verse 1. Let's take a look at the opening words of this amazing book. And I must say that when I began to study the Bible, the first book I read on my own was Joshua. And I was so intrigued by it that I immediately went back and started at the beginning. But Exodus has always held a special part in my heart. And anyways, if I seem a little extra excited about going through Exodus, now you have some background. But Exodus 1:1 says, "These are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob, each with his household." In Hebrew is Va'ela Shemot. And these are the Shemot, and that's what gives the book its name. The books of the Torah in Hebrew come from the first significant word found in the book. Bereshit, Genesis, the first word of Genesis is Bereshit, in the beginning. The first significant word of Exodus is the second word of the book, Shemot, names. And these are the names. The names of who? The Bnei Yisrael, the sons of Israel, Haboim Mitzrayim, who are coming to Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is the Hebrew name for Egypt. Now, what's interesting here is that the rabbis of old have noticed that the initial letters of Shemot B'nai Yisrael Habaim, of those four words, spell the word Shivya. Shin Beit Yad He, and Shivya means captivity. And things like this happen all the time in the Hebrew. And it's almost as if God is saying, from the day that the sons of Israel descended into Egypt, as they went with Jacob and their families to see Joseph, who was already there, I knew that captivity was going to happen. In fact, way back in Genesis, around chapter 15, God had prophesied that Abraham's children would be slaves, be taken captive in a foreign land. And now here we see this captivity beginning. As we go on to verse 10, we read about how the Israelites their population exploded. Even though they were in a pressure cooker, they were in Egypt and they're being made slaves. That sure did not keep them from multiplying. They took that commandment, be fruitful, multiply, very seriously. But you have to understand that the way the sages see Egypt during this time is as a womb. And as a womb is dark and kind of hot and closed in and confining. It's the place where that fertilized egg, the cells just explode. One cell becomes 2, and 2 becomes 4, then 8 and 16, and 9 months later you've got this new human being being born. So they see Mitzrayim, Egypt, as being a womb. And then through Moses, Israel is birthed, and crossing the Red Sea is like the breaking of the waters, where they come out and they come into their freedom. But they come out as infants, and they have a lot to learn. So then he gives them the Torah to help raise them and teach them how to live. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. Pharaoh became very fearful of this exploding population of Jewish slaves, and he said, "Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply, and if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." If only this Pharaoh had been like the Pharaoh in the days of Joseph, he would have realized, look how God is blessing us with all these Jewish souls. Let's take good care of them and bless them. But instead, he tried to enslave them, and because he did that, he now became afraid of them. What you see here in this verse basically is the seed of anti-Semitism in all of its forms. But this phrase, lest they multiply, in Hebrew is pin yirbe. Pin yirbe. Pen means lest. Yirbe means they multiply. Now you find almost the exact same expression 2 verses later in Exodus 1:12. It says, but the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. Now if you look at the phrase, the more they multiplied, it's kin yirbe. Hear the difference? In 10 it's pin yirbe, lest they multiply. Here it's kin yirbe, the more they multiplied. The only difference between these two phrases is the first letter, pei in pen and chaf in chin. Now the letter pei, this is it here, pin yirbe, lest they multiply. This letter is called the letter pei, and pei means mouth. And according to the sages and Jewish lore, it's a picture of a mouth. You have a lower jaw, and there's the back of the throat, the upper jaw, and there's the tooth. But the letter chaf looks like the letter pei, except the tooth is missing. And the sages, in a humorous way, say, the more they multiplied and the more Pharaoh plotted against them, God pulled his tooth. So Pharaoh said, lest they multiply, pin yirbe. But God orchestrated so, chen yirbe, the more they multiplied. He pulled Pharaoh's tooth, and he was unable to destroy the Israelites. When we go down to verse 14, it says, and he made their lives bitter with crushing hardness. With crushing hardness. And he made them make the bricks, as you know. With crushing hardness is one word in Hebrew. It's befarech. The letter beit at the front of a word means with or in. It's a preposition. And farech means crushing hardness, befarech. But the sages look at these Hebrew words, and they see in them arrangements of other words. And without even having to rearrange the letters, what they do is this. They slice the word in two, right in the middle. And then they say, you know, if we take those first letters, two letters, beit and pei, that could be with speech or with a mouth. Remember, we learned that the letter pei means mouth. So beit pei can mean with a mouth or with what comes out of the mouth, speech. And the last two letters spell rech, which means soft. It's the root of the word for tenderness and mercy. And so they say you can read this word bepei rech, with soft speech. Now, we aren't told how Pharaoh went about enslaving the Israelites. I mean, when they went into Egypt, they were the favored people. They were given the land of Goshen, which was the choice real estate in Egypt. And they were the family of Joseph, who was ruling Egypt and who was second only to Pharaoh himself. And people loved Joseph and they embraced his family. But what happened that what started off with such a lofty position deteriorated to the point where these Jews are now slaves to Egypt? We're not told. But the sages say we are given a hint in this word. Befarech, with crushing hardness, can also be bepei rech, with soft speech. As if somehow over time Pharaoh was able to enslave them with soft, flattering speech. You know, there's a lot of truth in this as a general principle, because how many people have been tempted and fallen into sin and been entrapped and enslaved to it because of soft words? Isn't this exactly what the serpent did with Adam and Eve? So anyways, something to think about. We don't build hard theology on this, But you know what? There are so many levels of meaning to every Hebrew letter and word and sentence in the Torah that God, I think, gives us hints as we look more deeply into the text. Well, then, chapter 4, God is appearing to Moses there at the burning bush, and they carry on a conversation, and he wants Moses to go back to Egypt and lead the people out and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. But Moses offers up several excuses. And there are 4 excuses. It's a great study to go through and look at the excuses Moses gives about why this is a bad idea to send me back to Egypt. But one of the excuses is, well, Lord, they're not going to believe me. So Adonai said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. Let's look at these 2 words, the word what and the word staff. Now the word what, interrogative, is the word ma. Mem he, ma. What is that? Ma. What is that in your hand? And then Moses said, it's a staff. Now the word for staff is the word mate. Mem, tet, he. Now you'll notice that the first and last letters spell the word ma. But here's the interesting thing about this word mate and the letter tet in the middle. According to Jewish lore, the letter tet is a picture of a serpent. And you can see, if I blow this up, this is supposed to be the head of the serpent on the left, and this is the tail of the serpent curling up on the right, as if the serpent is kind of standing up with its head and its tail coming up over its back. So what happened when Moses answered the question? What is that in your hand? Oh, it's a mate. Then Adonai said, cast it down. And what did the mate become? Became a tet. When I think of this story, it's not so much that the staff became a serpent as God revealed the serpent that was already there in the staff. Because as a shepherd, and Moses had been a shepherd for 40 years, his staff was a symbol of his control, of his status, of his authority, of his livelihood, of his position, that he was the shepherd of these sheep. And he used that staff to control the sheep and to support himself. He relied on that staff. I don't think we in the modern world can even begin to imagine just how important of an instrument a staff was to someone in the wilderness, especially a shepherd. But therein lies its danger, because the staff is what Moses relied on, and God says, I want you to let go of it. And God asks you and me to let go of the thing we rely upon so much. And if we obey him and let go of it, he'll reveal it to us for what it really is and what it can be if it's not yielded to him. So when Moses let go of this, he ran from it. Oh, it's a serpent. I imagine it was a poisonous one. But then, after Moses saw what this staff was, then God says, okay, now go grasp it. And I don't think Moses wanted anything to do with this serpent anymore. But he said to take it by the tail, which is not the right way to grab a poisonous snake, but I don't think there is any good way I'd want to grab a poisoned serpent. But Moses took it by the tail and immediately turned back into a staff. No, I can't imagine Moses ever looking at that staff the same way again. Because now he knew the danger that lay within the staff. But that staff from that point on is called the staff of God. And whatever we yield up to God becomes his. And he may keep it, or he may say, okay, now take it back up. But now our relationship to that thing is forever changed. And it was with this staff that Moses performed signs before the people and before Pharaoh. And it's the staff that was used to trigger so many, that's not the right word, to initiate so many of the miracles in the wilderness. So God invites us to yield ourselves to Him. And if we do, we fully give away who we are and give away the things we have, whatever it is we rely upon for our security, then God may give them back to us, but now He'll use them for His glory. It's an amazing lesson here. So I hope you can hear and appreciate what is being said. So, there are so many things in this chapter, but I wanted to bring out just a few of these seasonings in this portion. And Exodus is filled with wonders in the Hebrew and in things that appear in the Torah scroll. So I'm very excited to share these things with you as we go through the book of names, Shemot, the book of Exodus. So until next time, I wish you shalom and may God bless.
That's a wrap.